We use Contact as our sampler.
Yeah.
So all our samples are in the library and easy to find. So good housekeeping is definitely something that we've
Where do you usually source sample from? Are you taking everything from records to CDs?
Yeah, we've got our own sample pack that we've gone through over the years. There are, sample CDs from Loop Masters, Sample Magic and that, but there's also like things we picked off of records, and it's all sort of in a folder, the hats and the bits that we like. So we just literally go through those folders.
Yeah, there are kind of go-tos all the time whenever we're starting projects. Yeah, we can't stress enough about good housekeeping, because something that we only discovered maybe about a year ago. And for workflow, it's so much better to have, all the kicks that you normally use in tracks, or the kicks that you like, and hats, claps, bits of percussion. It's all in the sampler, all ready to go. So you're basically just dropping a MIDI note in when you're creating the track, drop the snare in, and you can just cycle through until you hit the right snare that fits in with the kick drum or fits in with the hi-hats. And it just makes life so much easier, especially when you're trying to do things for a shorter time. You know, your workflow has to be spot on, and it just makes things so much easier.
With the soft synths, I tend to really start with a preset and then mold it from there, and I'm like unashamedly do that. I think there's a real purity around people's not using presets and making everything from scratch, and go for it, do that. But I would say I will start with a preset and then I will deconstruct it to find what is giving it the characteristics it has, and then maybe I'll change certain parts and I'll learn about it by doing that. So yeah, Omnisphere is just incredible for that. And I use a soft synth in a way where what I'll do is I'll make something in MIDI, and then I will just convert it to audio, and then I'll delete my soft synth from the project, and then I'll just only have the residual audio, and then I'll just kind of manipulate that, whether it's like reversing or time stretching, or then putting that into a sampler. So that's where I think I get a lot of my kind of manipulated synth sounds from. I really try to start in the opposite, wherever I've been, I'm going to go, okay, now I'm going to do this one, which is quite a chaotic way of working. And I think it can annoy people if I'm in the studio with them, because I'm just like, well, don't do what you think you should do. Do the absolute opposite and see if there's something that you rub up against that will create something unique.
For me, the Prophet 6 has got the largest proportion of beautiful parameter space. So there's synths that can do just as beautiful things, and a lot more things, but maybe there's parts of that parameter space that I don't really like the sound and I have to tune them more carefully. The Prophet 6 is just this lovely, it's a lovely crafted thing that just has a lot of beauty in it. So yeah, I use it a lot. The Trigon 6, again, another Dave Smith, RIP, has also become one of my favorites. It's much one of the more newer, the newer synths they've come up with, and it's similar level of complexity. It's quite a simple synth, but one that you can jump in and build, and you don't get lost in the complexity. I hate, to be honest, I hate patch diving, and I hate menu diving and shortcuts. The synths that are my favorite ones, like those, there's no digital display. It's just, you can do presets, and it's just like an old school LCD watch sort of display, but there's no menu diving. You don't need shortcuts. Everything's there. You can just jam and play, and you get this real tactile sort of interaction with it. And that's what I look for, to be honest, with hardware synths. And that's why I have all these pedals, again, so I can have real tactile interaction with what I'm doing. But the other synths I use a lot, the Summit is great. So I did a track called, that's a Novation Summit. I did a track called Spike. That was predominantly the Summit. The Summit's like, the Prophet's like, if I want, or the Trigon 6 are more, if I want some emotive sort of classic analog sounding things. The Summit's a bit more like, when I have tracks like Vertebrae, which is more like drum and bass track with the gnarly sounds. But if I want something more aggressive or Spike with this sort of raw type, more digital sounding, I suppose, if that's the, I mean, it's still analog, obviously, but it's a way of explaining what I mean, I think. The Summit's great. It's got a lot of modulation potential. And then, oh yeah, the Juno 6, again, at the end there. I mean, again, that's going much further back to like real classic FM synth. And again, I use that. Again, that does even less. That does much less, but what it does amazingly. So again, there's certain tracks. Four Tone Reflections was very predominantly the Juno 6. And it has a very particular sound, and it's really full as well. So that's great when I can use it.
But actually, a lot of the time, everything ended up just being recorded on one mic. I think it was like a RE20 electro voice, mic. And I think in the end, most of the good stuff came from just having one mic and really dampening the drums, and then just recording it as dry as possible with one mic. And that seemed to be, with all the processing on it, that seemed to be the answer. We tried the multi-track take of drums, but it just didn't really come across in the same way. So yeah, it's sort of Motown styly one mic job.
If an idea isn't really working within the first 30 minutes, don't feel like you have to keep on working with it. Move on to something else. Don't feel like you have to finish a project in order to go on to the next one. You know, have certain ideas on the go. I'll be working on 10 different original projects at a time. If I really want to finish this one project, sometimes I have to finish the other 5 to get this one finished. I have to get in a flow. So, you know, I'm not saying if you do a track for 30 minutes, it's going nowhere. Don't throw it away. Don't bin it, but go to something else and try and create something new, and that will spark some new ideas and will help you finish some of the other stuff. I've got about 200 unfinished projects on there I still need to get through, and sometimes you can just spend ages on them and you get nowhere, and you have a bit of a roll. You finish 5 tracks and you go to it and you're like, oh my god, this idea I had in that one, that could work in there. Suddenly it all comes together. So yeah, that would be my main advice. You know, don't beat yourself up if you can't get an idea finished straight away. You know, it's fine. Move on to the next one. You know, it's all an ideas thing. It's supposed to be fun, and if you're spending a lot of time on one idea and it's not getting anywhere, then move on to something else. It's all good.
This song started out as a really cheesy song called Sunrise, which I hated. And I started out by playing on the piano, and I've just came up with this lovely little theme. Sometimes these lovely themes come out and I'm a bit unsure about what to do with them because they're just so beautiful. And then I just spend weeks and months trying to twist them into something a bit more complex and a bit more interesting and not so like shallow in terms of the emotion. And so this track started out really cheesy. I evolved it into a different kind of cheesiness, a song called Miracles. I worked really hard on it. I finished it and I loved it, and I felt like I'd really expressed something important. And then the following week I decided that I completely hated it, and I took the elements that I liked still, and I was like basically just in a really bad mood. And I hated how sweet the original sounded, so I just kind of tried to do like a new version or like a different mix of the original Miracles. So this is Miracles Prelude, and this is like the dark brother that comes before the sweet sister song, so they've become like a pair now.
What I teach the kids is that the environment that you work in is also very, very important. You can concentrate on this amazing plugin that's going to answer all your questions and prayers and everything, but it doesn't. You can think about this or that piece of equipment, but actually, when you get to a certain level, and most people are at a certain level just with a computer anyway, your environment that you work in. So have some plants, have some natural light if possible, have a radio on in the kitchen so that you could just go off to the kitchen and you hear something that you haven't chosen, that takes your mind somewhere completely different and refreshes you in such a way. Those sort of things are really, really important to be creative, I think. Being ergonomically in a good position. So if you're working in a studio, make sure that the seat is really, really comfortable. Stupid things like this, right? Make sure that the table is the right height, that you have a light behind the computer screen so you don't get knackered with your eyes. Don't force yourself to constantly listen to the music all the time. I call it Guantanamo Baying yourself, where you're constantly playing the same music 24 hours and then you have no choice but to like it, and then you dream of it. It's like if you remember playing Command & Conquer or SimCity for 8 or 9 hours, then you go to bed and you're still seeing everyone in your eyes on the screen in front of you. You don't want to do that. You want to tune out. So sometimes switch it off, listen to radio, watch a studio podcast about something because it makes you think in a different way. And then just apply those things and then see what happens. So I don't really have like any magic tips. It's just really, it's more spiritual and more ergonomic and just about respecting your own body in that environment. Christ, did I just turn into a hippie? Probably did. Not good.
And then on my master, we were talking about this the other day because I work with this on. I've got another maximizer and I work with this on while I'm writing because I find it's quite important to get a feel for the sound of the track whilst you're writing stuff. So rather than doing all that at the end when you're like mixing the track or whatever, I think it's important, like for me, creatively, to have that on. I want to feel that vibe of the track as I'm writing. I want to feel it like it might sound towards the end whilst I'm writing, because that's part of the inspiration for me. I think working really, really dry until like the end it just doesn't work for me.
And because the first vocoder I used was a kind of Korg they were using, and we were not very happy with the sound, so we chose to go with an old another vocoder called the VP 550, a Roland VP 550, which was, I think, more or less a kind of commercial failure. And I always liked commercial failure in terms of hardware synthesizers because they always have something unique. And the VP 550 is probably one of the best vocal processor effects, because for two different reasons: the quality of the processing, but also the fact that you can, in the hardware, I mean, mixing the dry sound, which is most of the time not the case for vocoder, where you have problem of understand the syllabs and the words as we know. So we use that, and they use that. I mean, Nicolas and Jean-Benoit did a great job, and we actually recorded the first try here in this place, and then they finalized the old sound in their studio, and this is the Switch me on, play my song. A really great sound.